Empress Jito. Born in 645, died in 703. The 41st sovereign of Japan, and one of only 8 women ever to sit on the throne. She inherited a country with no real capital, no settled laws, and no clear heir. She gave it all 3. This is her story. The morning after her husband died, the empress did not weep where the court could see her. She walked to the half-finished palace records he had left on his desk. The ink was dry. The dynasty was not. She picked up the brush. This is the story of Empress Jito, a woman the textbooks barely mention, who built the first city Japan ever planned. She lost her husband, then her only son, then almost her grandson. And yet, in 12 years on the throne, she gave Japan its first written legal code, its first grid-planned capital, and the administrative skeleton that every government here has worn since. Most rulers are remembered for what they took. She is one of the few remembered for what she built. She was born in the year 645, in the months after a coup. The man who became her father, Emperor Tenji, had just helped assassinate the most powerful family at court. Her childhood was political weather. By the time she was 13, she had been married to her uncle, the prince who would later be called Emperor Tenmu. This was not unusual. The court guarded its bloodlines the way mountain villages guarded their seeds. For most of her early life she was simply known as Princess Yunonis Arara. The records describe her as quiet, watchful, and unusually well-read. She studied Chinese law and Buddhist scripture. She copied poems from the continent into the margins of her notebooks. Court women in the 7th century were not expected to govern, but they were expected to remember. She remembered everything. In 672, when she was 27, her husband revolted against her father. The conflict was brutal and short. Tenmu won. The capital moved. She moved with it. For the next 14 years she sat at the right of one of the most reform-minded emperors Japan had ever produced. Together they imported Chinese statecraft, drafted new ranks for nobles, ordered a national history. She was not the throne. But she was the second voice in every room where the throne spoke. Then in 686, Tenmu died. Her grief had no time to settle. Within a month of her husband's death, the court began to fracture along bloodlines. Her own son, Prince Kusakabe, was the formal heir. But there was another contender, Prince Otsu, the empress's stepson, brilliant, charismatic, beloved by the soldiers. Some said the throne should go to talent, not to lineage. Some said both. The empress acted. 23 days after Tenmu's funeral, Prince Otsu was accused of treason. The trial was swift. The execution was swifter. He was 24. He left behind a single poem written the morning of his death, a quiet, unbearable thing about waking up to find the world unchanged. Historians have argued for 13 centuries about whether the empress ordered Otsu's death directly. The records are careful. What is not in dispute is that the woman now running the court did not allow ambiguity to stand. The throne would pass through her son, or it would not pass at all. It did not pass through her son. In 689, 3 years after his rival's death, Prince Kusakabe died of illness. He was 28. He had never ruled. This is the moment that should have ended her. She had no other adult sons. The next heir was her grandson, Prince Karu, who was 7 years old. The court was not patient enough for a 7-year-old emperor. The factions were already moving. She did the thing no one expected. She took the throne herself. In 690, at age 45, she became Empress Jito, the first woman to take the imperial throne in nearly 50 years, and the first to do so as a regnant ruler rather than a regent. She did not call it a regency. She did not call it temporary. She called it the throne. For the next 12 years she ruled alone. She finished her husband's legal code, the Asuka Kiyomihara Code, the first written law to govern Japan from the top down. She formalized the rank system, the tax system, the postal roads. She had her grandson trained, but she did not hurry him. And then, in 694, she did the thing that no Japanese ruler had ever attempted at scale. She built a city. Until Empress Jito, the Japanese capital had moved with each emperor. A palace was built, a court gathered, an emperor died, and the next emperor, fearing pollution, ghosts, faction, built somewhere else. There was no permanent center. There was no shared map. She decided this had to end. She chose a flat plain on the Asuka River, surrounded by 3 sacred mountains, Unibai, Miminashi, and Kagu. She named it Fujiwara-kyo. Fujiwara capital. And she planned it on a Chinese grid. This had never been done in Japan before. Streets at right angles. Wards numbered. A central palace facing south, exactly as the Chinese sovereigns faced south. A market, a treasury, a bureau of records. For the first time, the capital was not the emperor's house. The capital was the state. She lived there. She ruled from there. She had bureaucrats trained, and she made them write things down. The Asuka period quietly ended in her grid of streets. In 697, when her grandson Karu was 15, she abdicated in his favor. He took the name Emperor Monmu. She did not retire. She kept the new title of Daijo Tenno, retired sovereign, and continued to advise from behind. The pattern she invented that year would last for centuries. A young emperor on the throne. An older sovereign behind him. The Japanese imperial institution learned, from her, how to age without dying. She lived 6 more years. She wrote poetry. At least one of her poems would be remembered for 1,000 years. She watched her capital fill with bureaucrats. She watched her grandson grow into the kind of ruler who could be trusted with what she had built. She died in 703. 8 years after her death, the capital she had built was abandoned. The court moved to a larger grid called Heihokyo, then Heian-kyo. Fujiwara-kyo faded into rice fields. But the grid had survived the move. The law had survived the move. The idea that the capital was not the emperor, that it was the country itself, organized, survived everything. There is a famous poem of hers, 8 lines, written in spring. It is about laundry drying on a mountain. In English the meaning is roughly, spring has passed and summer seems to have come, the white robes are spread to dry on Mount Kagu of the heavens. 500 years later it would be chosen as one of the 100 most important poems in the language. School children still memorize it. It is a strange thing for the most consequential ruler of her century to be best remembered for laundry on a hill. But maybe she would have liked that. The poem is small. The mountain is real. The work of empire goes on quietly behind it. When you walk the streets of any Japanese city today and notice the grid, the wards, the careful right angles, that is her hand. When you read about Japan having a single, written legal code from the 8th century onward, that is her hand. When the imperial family steps aside while still advising, that is her invention. She is not on the currency. She is not in the popular history books in English. The textbooks call her a transitional figure between 2 emperors named Tenmu and Monmu, as if she were a comma. She was the sentence. Tales of Old Japan publishes 1 story every Sunday, Wednesday, and Saturday. If this one moved you, subscribe, and consider reading more at the Japan Dispatch, the newsletter that keeps these stories alive. Link in the description. Next episode, a man who polished swords for emperors he never met. Until then, walk softly.